DDG, episode 182. My name is Dave Hunt, and I'm joined by Michael Swick.
Dave, how's it going? We got a busy episode that's mainly about one thing, but also your personal life kind of busy, or it's about to pick up. And I'm just dealing with the corporate.
Yeah, so my store is actually going to open. It's been multiple delays. I don't even know what at this point in time. I think it was supposed to be late April at one point in time. So, and now it's going to be early July. So, I will we'll get it out of the way right off the bat. I will most likely be out the next 2 weeks. Just because my life will be easier if I don't have to worry about this. I love all you guys, but there's a lot going on with opening up a building, and it's my responsibility as the boss. So Michael has a substitute lined up for next week, and tentatively the following week, the week of like July 10th, 9th, or whatever that is, you guys might be able to get a part 2 of the Josh Langford conversation, this time involving Michael instead of just me.
Yeah, and I haven't reached out to him yet, so if he's listening right now, he's going to be like, what?
So, yeah.
But yeah, I'll probably...
I think he texts the number that you don't use anymore.
So it's funny, I just texted him yesterday.
Okay.
My brother-in-law gave me the Atari Lego set.
Uh-huh.
So immediately I had to text a picture of it to Josh because it's Atari and Lego, and I'm like, hey, my first Atari. And realized that man doesn't have my new number. So
did he respond?
He did. But okay. I did put my name in it.
Okay.
I'm like, let me just put my full name, because I can't just put Michael because I don't talk to him regularly anymore. So I can't just be like, hey, it's Michael. It's too generic of a name.
Yeah, I think he would have been smart enough to figure it out. Legos, Atari, video game stuff, Michael. I think he would have been all right.
He's getting old, you know. Probably knows a few Michaels by now.
He does listen to this, so you are gonna. We might not get a response from him for like 10 days, but you'll get a response from him on the show.
But what platform is he gonna respond to me on? Is the question. And I'm just gonna get a random tweet and be like, he still uses that.
You'll get a direct text from him probably.
We'll see.
He's not passive aggressive like that. All right, so we are Digital Days Gaming. We are a weekly podcast that posts Thursday morning, 6 a.m. Eastern Time. We also stream live on Twitch, twitch.tv/Digital Days Gaming. You can check us out there. Any of the podcast platforms you use. Following on Twitch is free. Subscribing and liking the streams and all that stuff is free also. Subscribing the streams is not free, but subscribing to the podcast feeds is free. You can subscribe on Twitch if you choose. You can use your Prime Gaming sub on us. Prime days are coming up, so there might be some cool things on sale on the Amazon store for you to consider getting a Prime membership, even at the 30-day thing, or if that's on sale. And then with that, you link it to your Twitch, and you get Prime Gaming, free games, like a lot of stuff.
Usually around July.
Prime
Day, they end up boosting that up pretty well.
So sometimes that'll be PlayStation stuff, sometimes it'll be Switch stuff, majority of the time it's PC stuff, but there's definitely some in-game content in there. So if you pick up Prime, link it with Twitch, get Prime Gaming, use the sub on us if you choose. Leave us a review on the podcast platform. Spotify, I think you can review individual episodes. Podcast Addict, it's been a while since we had a review, so please consider, a while since we had a review that I saw. So please consider leaving a review, and that would be helpful, helps us grow, especially with all the content we just did for June, covering Summer Games Fest stuff, and getting ready to ramp up into the fall. And there's actually some software coming out this year, so we'll have some more stuff to talk about. But yeah, everything else is linked in the show notes, so check that out. And reluctantly, we're going to jump right into this news.
Dave, we talk about days like this when anytime two corporations are fighting in court, we don't really care about what the outcome's going to be, but we care about the news that comes out of that. We didn't really...
I'm getting to the point where I don't anymore, though, because
it's so fun. Dave, it's so
but
fun.
we're finding out information that we probably shouldn't find out.
Mm-hmm.
And we're finding it out because it's in court, which I know you're fascinated by.
Yeah.
And there's a percentage of me that's fascinated by it too. But then all it does is piss off the other person that can't get it. So there's no winner in this. And I want to, before we dig deep into this, any perspective that I'm giving, I want to make sure that you guys understand that at this point in time, I don't know if I'm pro PlayStation, pro Microsoft, pro Game Pass, or any of that stuff anymore. I enjoy playing games, and the more access that you can have to games at the easier cost is what I want. I don't care about Microsoft profits. I don't care about the next consoles that are coming. I don't care about any of that stuff. But to see like to see a PlayStation fan say I should have Indiana Jones. Like, you didn't know Indiana Jones was coming. Like, like, oh, Microsoft just bought Bethesda because it's in the notes, but because they were afraid that PlayStation was going to buy exclusivity to Starfield. So if PlayStation bought exclusivity to Starfield, you're totally cool with it. But Microsoft buying Bethesda, you're not cool with. I'm sorry, but that makes you kind of a hypocrite.
Oh, 100%. And I also want to make clear that I see both PlayStation and Xbox as two greedy corporations that are doing what's best for their interest. Like, both of them will put out, statements being like they're fighting for the gamers, but no, they're just fighting for money. So I don't care who wins from this battle. It's very much PlayStation versus Xbox, even though it's like the US government versus Microsoft and the CMA versus Microsoft, but in reality it comes down to console wars, and I don't care who wins, because I'm just going to play the games wherever they're out. And like, if one of these companies went away tomorrow, would I be pissed? No. Would I be disappointed because I have one of their consoles? A little bit, but I'll just start playing the games wherever they come out.
Right.
Like, I don't really care if one company survives. I want them all to survive because that's good for competition, but at the same time, I'm not like married to a box. I'm not married to one platform. So I just like watching this shit show of like executives back talking and kind of just publicly lying and then being called out on it because emails get released. So Dave, let's just jump right into it. Before the show started, me and Dave were talking like, we're glad this is happening because there isn't much news outside of this FTC.
This is E3.
Yeah, this is a thing. So a lot of stuff we're going to cover is going to be like, yeah, no shit, but also just confirmation on a lot of things. And a lot of stuff me and Dave have been speculating on a lot is basically confirmed through a majority of this. But let's start with the one that I think everyone was the most excited about, and that is Jim Ryan. So Jim Ryan submitted his video deposition today, actually, and a little bit, I think, on Tuesday. For the most part, it sounds like they had video deposition over like 2 days of him, but they broke it down into like an hour chunk or something like that. And most of it has been concealed at the request of Jim Ryan and PlayStation.
Which looks shady.
Yeah, which doesn't look good. But basically, this is... Oh, sorry, I put like a weird note. This says Vita for some reason.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, okay.
Yeah, I'm confused. Okay, so basically, Jim Ryan, if you remember a couple months ago, Dave, PlayStation was like very against the FTC looking at emails from PlayStation. They were like, no, we don't need to do that. And then Microsoft appealed and actually won the ability to go back to emails from like 2019. So through the emails that we've been able to see, a lot of them have been concealed and are being like held, hidden from the public. But what email that did get out is basically Jim Ryan basically just straight up saying like, yeah, Call of Duty's not going to go exclusive. And it's not going to affect PlayStation's business too much. And it was very confident that the acquisition of Activision Blizzard was not going to affect Sony business too much, because Jim Ryan knows that Call of Duty does not have a business without PlayStation. The reason this is important is it is the opposite of what Jim Ryan's been saying publicly to the CMA, to the FTC. So this information just kind of makes Jim Ryan just look a little bad. Dave, can't be too shocking that privately Jim Ryan is like, PlayStation's going to be fine, right?
Yeah, more than fine, to quote him. Like, you know, Michael gave me like homework today to make sure that I was even more irritated when I'm on this on this podcast. So yeah, he just like it's the thing that we've always talked about. Like, that my main problem with Ryan is that he has this sleazy salesman mentality to him compared to Layden. Where, you know, Layden was an executive that you genuinely felt played video games, and Jim Ryan, I don't feel like he plays video games, and he's publicly said that his goal is just to make millions of dollars. Like, that's his goal. And so what he says out of his mouth publicly and then what he also communicates to his teams are different things, and that automatically knocks you down a rung or two, in my opinion, of you as a leader. I understand that sometimes you have to toe a company line and things like that, but to your point, like you said earlier, like you can't sit there and say like you're pro gamer and come out and say like this is bad for gaming, when at the same time you're throwing money at Square Enix to make sure that Xbox doesn't have something.
And that is a big thing we're going to talk about in terms of exclusivity.
So,
do you see the perspective though, Dave, that like as a leader of PlayStation, you wake up and you hear your competition has bought your biggest game maker, you would have to tell the people under you like everything's going to be fine, right? And I would believe
but at the same time, everything is going to be fine.
Yeah.
But now you're sitting there crying to the FTC and the CMA when you're telling your employees that you're going to be fine regardless of this outcome.
Yeah,
which is true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's 100% true. You're telling your teams that everything's going to be fine. This is not a big deal. Really, nothing's on fire. You know, like as a brand, PlayStation is more than fine. Like the video recap that you had me watch, I didn't dig into it too much, but like they're not even classifying Nintendo as a competitor, either company. Yeah. Which is stupid.
Xbox is trying to classify the Switch as a competitor,
but the FTC is not.
No, they refuse to accept
and
that.
So even with their math, like even when I think the Xbox lawyer, Microsoft lawyer, even with the FTC, he's like, okay, I'll play your game, and if I play your game and use your math, Sony still wins 51% to 49%. So why are we having this conversation? Because you still have them. You have more.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. So I'm just gonna bring this up. It was in the notes, but like, just so you know, the extent of like the FTC trying to not include Nintendo in this. At one point, according to The Verge, props were brought out of an Xbox, a Nintendo Switch, and a PlayStation 5 to show the judge that the Switch is completely different looking than the Switch and the Xbox. Therefore, it should not count as a market leader in gaming. And that sounds fucking insane. And
that's like somebody taking my PC, what is this thing, my CyberPower PC, and putting it next to my ROG Ally and be like, these two things can't compete against each other, look at the size.
Yeah, and that's basically what was going. To the judge's credit, the judge seems like they just don't have any patience for this bullshit, and we'll talk about that as we go on. But it is showing that like there is a level that I don't want to defend Microsoft, but it definitely seems like they were trying to stack the deck on them, but the people stacking the deck are incompetent. And I'm talking about on the FTC side.
Yeah.
But it definitely seems like they were trying to do gotcha moments, and it just wasn't.
I want to get this out of the way right away too. Like optically, from the FTC standpoint, they look terrible.
Yeah.
They're trying to stop the merger of two American companies in support of a non-American company. Like. Yeah, I don't want to get into the weeds with what that means or doesn't mean from a political standpoint or from a country standpoint or anything like that. But Activision and Microsoft are American-based companies. Sony is not. Sony has a division in America. Yes,
it's just weird optics that they're like defending like a
Japanese company.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like it's weird that's what's happening.
That's the extent that I want to get to with that. Like that's all I'm saying is that. These are two companies that are rooted in the United States. Yes, they have things, I'm sure, across the country and across the world. But Sony is based out of Japan. Like they're grown from Japan. Microsoft is grown from Washington State, and Activision Blizzard is grown from California.
Yeah, it's just kind of a bizarre thing that they're putting so much effort, and also seeming like they're only getting their information from this Japanese company, that it's just making things kind of baffling. Okay, so this one was funny. Jim Ryan claims he spoke to all publishers and they agree Game Pass is destructive of value and they don't like it. I just wanted to bring up that quote because like I totally can understand that like Jim Ryan did talk to publishers that, you know, would agree with PlayStation that like Game Pass isn't good for games, and that he
went to Naughty Dog, Insomniac, and Sucker Punch, and they all told him it's bad.
But the quote that was pulled from The Verge literally says he talked to all publishers and they agreed. Yeah. He's like, all my homies hate Game Pass, basically, and it's a weird thing to say on record. And like you can make the argument, yes, Game Pass could be destructive to the video game industry in the long term in terms of like quality and support and like developers getting paid. There's an argument to be made there, but Jim Ryan's not the one to make that argument. And it's just a great quote. Jim Ryan was great quotes, and we only got to see like a little chunk of the Jim Ryan stuff basically from what's been happening. So Jim Ryan, when asked if Starfield and Redfall being exclusive is anti-competitive, Ryan didn't see it as anti-competitive. He thinks it's good business, but he doesn't like it. Like, it was basically what the quote came out to, which is just like him being honest, at least in terms of like, he is under oath, so he has to be honest. So he was just like, they own them, so if they're exclusive, it makes sense. Like, he's not against it. He just doesn't like it.
I don't know if it was the Microsoft lawyer or the FTC.
It's representative. I forget exactly how.
Yeah, like the FTC, MC communicator asked him, like, if you were running Xbox, like, would you do this? And he goes, that's a hypothetical question that I won't answer. Like, they pretty much said, like, if you bought Activision Blizzard, like, what would you do with it? And he goes, that's a hypothetical question I'm not prepared to answer. Like, yeah. And I just think he looks awful. Like, the questioning coming from the FTC is terrible, based on the clips and images and transcripts and stuff that we've seen in bite-sized parts on Twitter. I definitely have not fallen down the rabbit hole that you've fallen down, like where I think you actually are actively listening to these depositions.
I am. It's hard to do because, okay, so let me just give you finish your thoughts and I'll tell you about like how you can listen to this.
This is stuff that, like I said at the very beginning, like, this is stuff that we shouldn't be knowing about, and at the same time, like, Microsoft is being very open and honest because they're getting demolished in the console market, the physical hardware market. They're getting destroyed, and they're trying to show like why they're doing this. You can agree or disagree with Microsoft buying platforms or buying software, which is, yes, that's 100% what they're doing, but that's capitalism. That's the world. Like, that's what we live in, and it's really no different than, like, I guess I just don't understand how they can be mad that Phil Spencer renegotiated his Indiana Jones contract with the company that he now owns to where now it is an exclusive. The Indiana Jones games will be exclusive to the Xbox ecosystem, but you're totally okay with and you champion Sony taking Spider-Man and essentially grabbing full control of Spider-Man's video game IP from Marvel to where nobody will touch Spider-Man now because of the bar that Insomniac has set. And everybody's like, well, Microsoft had their chance and they said no because they were trying to, at that point in time, trying to focus on their initial IP, on their first-party IPs that were struggling in hell. That was Spencer's focus 5 years ago, or 2014, 2015, and at the same time, Sony's presence wasn't even strong enough with their first-party studios for them to give it to a first-party studio. They gave it to a second-party studio that they then purchased.
Yeah. Basically, they gave them a trial run, saw what they were doing, and were like, we just need to.
People forget that when Spider-Man 1 came out, Insomniac was not owned by Sony. Yeah. They've already forgotten that. I love how that window gets extended.
They were purchased a little after the game released, right? Like, once it was like a success.
I'd have to look it up,
In other stuff, Ryan does not consider Nintendo a competitor because they don't compete in the same relevant markets, which is, I guess, we always say Nintendo plays in their own playfield, but like they're in a video game business, so I would say they're a competitor. I think there's like some wool being pulled over like the FTC's eyes and some of the like the judges' eyes of like basically being like, hey, look at Mario. Mario isn't being played by people that play Call of Duty. Like, they're trying to say like those markets don't cross over whatsoever, when in reality, like, I'd probably say like a good chunk of the Call of Duty players are probably playing like a Mario or Zelda as a secondary game.
I guess Sony bought Insomniac in fall of 2019 and Spider-Man came out in 2018.
Yeah, so like a year later.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically they're just Ryan's doubling down on like Nintendo doesn't compete in the same market, so they cannot be considered part of the discussion.
Which is fascinating to me because he does not have a single platform game that I think I could be wrong, but I don't think has surpassed 15 million sales in 1 year, and Nintendo does it constantly.
Yeah.
I don't know if anything has sold 15 million copies. That's a
The Last of Us Part 2, God of War, I believe either the God of War or The Last of Us Part 2 got close.
Right.
To that, I would say God of War, I think, might have been one.
Yeah.
That,
well, then you could just move it up to 20 million because Nintendo's done that too.
Exactly.
So.
You can keep moving the bar. Nintendo's going to just keep doing it.
Yep.
And then one that I think a lot of people are blowing out of proportion, and I think actually makes sense. Ryan believes that the money spent on Bungie will bring more money in return to PlayStation than the $69 billion acquisition of Activision will. And before I let you jump in, Dave, I think what he's talking about is like Bungie only cost them $3.9 billion, so therefore there's a greater chance for them to get that money back and then some, as opposed to the $70 million
I think he's talking about return on investment.
Yes.
So like if you just want to use round numbers, like let's just say they bought Bungie for $4 billion, let's just round it up, and within 20 years of the purchase they've generated $8 billion that they could attribute to the Bungie acquisition. That's 100% return on investment. For Microsoft, if you round it up to 80 billion, for Bethesda, or no, I'm sorry, for Activision, pardon me, they would in order for them to get 100% return on investment, that had to be like 160 billion. That would take a long time, like a much longer time. Nor do we ever know if you could really attribute 160 billion dollars to that purchase because of how broad of a spectrum Activision Blizzard is as a company compared to how narrow of a spectrum Bungie is.
Yeah, and then Ryan also talked about like the expertise that Bungie can provide to the other live service games will also generate. You can consider that money generated by Bungie. It's just funny though because I think people just saw the numbers and then we're just like, they think Bungie's going to make $69 billion, and it's like no, they're saying the amount of money it costs them is going to be a better return on investment than Activision Blizzard. Because Activision Blizzard at this point has cost more than $69 billion based on how much money they've had to spend around the world.
Also interesting because you had me listen to Destin from IGN, Destin Legary. The FTC, I think, is actually on the hook for the $3 billion if they block the merger.
Something like that. Yeah, there's like
there's some funky stuff in there or something like that where like Microsoft will pretty much be like, all right, we're done. Like if they want to tie this up in court for, I think Destin was saying for the next 3 years, like Microsoft's be like, no.
They could basically countersue and get like the money back, I believe is how that would work. So I think that's why Activision, like Microsoft's not really worried about that $3 billion. And I know people like to dangle that like that cost that's going to hurt them.
That's not going to save Activision, by the way. So
no, not at all. But yeah, that's all we got from the Jim Ryan stuff. Again, a lot of the stuff is being held secret. There's 2 more days of this, so they might play his video over the next 2 days. I'm curious how that works because he's not live streaming into the thing or conferencing in. It's just a video. So I guess when the lawyers want to try and prove one of their point, they can queue up the Jim Ryan video.
I think he has like a whole, like I'm sure that they have, I don't even know, 3 hours of an interview that he did with an FTC member, like in his office or something. And then when those things come up, I'm sure that the PlayStation representative, Sony representative has like everything clipped out. And he
goes,
"Here you go."
Sounds like, yeah.
Yeah. Here's his response to this. Oh, you're talking about that now? Okay, we're gonna fast forward, at 45 minutes. Here's his response to this. So.
And it sounds like they might have like 2 days worth of interviews of Jim Ryan, booked or like recorded already. So there's plenty of video to pull from. Will we ever see that stuff? Unlikely, unless this goes beyond this specific like trial or whatever exactly this is right now. Because it almost sounds like they're preparing their cases for like a full trial. But we'll move on to the other news that came out of this. Microsoft almost bought Bungie and Sega. So during the FTC stuff, emails were like revealed of basically Phil Spencer and I think Matthew Booty talking about like companies that they're allowed to go after and companies that they need to get further permission from the head of Microsoft. So this list, the 2 main ones that is worth talking about is Bungie and Sega. Those are the 2 big names. But also on that list was Supergiant Games, so the developers of Hades, Niantic, the Pokemon Go people, Zynga. Sounds like that deal was really close to being put through before Take-Two jumped in. And then IO Interactive. So, the Hitman people who, through this documentation, the IO game, the RPG they're working on, looks like that is going to be exclusive to Xbox because Xbox listed as a publisher internally. But this is a big list of stuff. This is from 2019. Of course, names dropped off that like wish list that was given to, like Daddy Microsoft for them to buy. And Bungie fell off. Sega apparently was still on that list for like 2 to 3 years straight. And then the other companies, were acquired by someone else, or like specific deals were struck. But yeah, looks like Bungie, like we're wondering about Bungie's like offers and everything. But looks like the Bungie stuff just PlayStation put a better offer out. Maybe Bungie was just like, we don't want to get in bed with Microsoft again because we've been there.
Yeah, so the most fascinating thing from me being a Bungie fan as I am is that I misspoke, 2 or 3 weeks ago because I misunderstood. But the codename Matter is not Marathon. There is a third IP that Bungie is working on outside of Destiny 2 and Marathon. I had said that Matter is Marathon, and it is not.
And that kind of came out through this stuff, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And that Marathon is anticipated to release in 2024, which means it's really going to be 2025. And then this other IP is 2025, which means it's really going to be 2026. Also, what we had talked about, like the big bullet point for Bungie is what they have done with Destiny in terms of a service game, like what they have been able to prove and establish and do with Destiny over the 7+ year time frame, and on top of it, what they were able to do with Halo over another 7+ year time frame. You're talking about 14+ years of 2 games of solid fan bases, whether there's multiple iterations of those games or not. The other thing that is interesting is that the con for Bungie in Microsoft's documentation is that Bungie has a high burn rate, which means that they go through cash fast, like super, super fast.
And that was what made Microsoft hesitate.
Yes. Some of that could be attributed to growth, and some of it could be like if you're working on 3 IPs, like, yeah, that's expensive. 3 IPs at the same time, like, that's expensive.
And independent.
In terms of opening different studios and the cadence that Bungie has been putting out content for Destiny, it attributes to a high burn rate as well.
I do like the bullet point for Bungie's positive is ability to ship and scale games. Like Xbox is like, they can ship a game.
Yeah,
we are interested in working with them.
Yeah, so it's always like super interesting to read some of those, like the bullet points of like what they what makes them a pro and what makes them a con, and when to people's points when they're like, there was all this talk that was that price tag on Bungie too high? Did Sony overpay? Well, sounds like A, they probably were in a bidding war.
Yeah.
And B, there's that huge retention cost that we know is in there, and C, like them, hate them, enjoy Destiny, don't like Destiny, like their cadence is solid. Like they put out, I think any company right now would take a game that has 125 concurrent players per day, 125,000 concurrent players per day, which Destiny gets on a slow day. So. Yeah.
And if you look at the expansions, like I would say each expansion is like a AA game in terms of like, length and production value. Like production value is AAA, but if you were to like make an expansion a single game, it would probably be like a AA game. So the idea that
they are $40 to $50 pieces of content.
Yeah.
But they continue to layer on top of the other $40 and $50 piece of content.
And it pulls in the full picture of Destiny.
Yeah.
And which is why, like, when I look at Destiny or Bungie, I'm just like, man, what if they just didn't have to do Destiny anymore? Like, what could they do?
Well, we're gonna find out.
Yeah, we're gonna find out eventually.
Because it's because now, to your point, it's like for a long time it was Halo, and then if you go all the way back, it was Marathon and nothing, and then it was Halo or nothing, and then it was now it's Destiny or nothing, and now we're going Destiny and Marathon and something else. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, if those 3 things hit, it'll just be and a 4th thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, especially if we're dealing with live service games. So I imagine Bungie will slip in like a one and done game here and there.
Yeah, which I think is what this 2025 title might be. But this is also the Zenga, or not the Zenga, the
ZeniMax Zenga.
No, the NetEase.
Oh, NetEase. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, this is NetEase. Like what we were talking about, the NetEase $100 million investment is still there.
Yeah.
Like even though Sony owns them, so
yeah. which we still will, like, maybe we'll find out through this whether like PlayStation had to do something with NetEase.
The biggest thing that I want to find out from this FTC hearing at this point in time, because Microsoft has been relatively transparent as far as I can tell, I want to know, and I really hope we hear it, but I want to know how much they paid for Ghostwire Tokyo. I want to know how much they paid for Deathloop, and I want to know how much they paid for Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know those numbers, because I think people might be surprised about what those numbers,
and
like,
we'll
what
talk
those
about
numbers
it
truly are. So.
In a little bit, like how much were they willing to pay for Starfield, because that was on the table as well, which we found out through this. It's funny though, when you look at the list of acquisitions, everything but Bungie and Zynga has led to deals that weren't acquisitions but like Game Pass deals. So they were looking at Sega. Clearly they must have talked to them, because now every Atlas release comes out day one on Game Pass. IO Interactive is now working on an exclusive Xbox game reportedly. And Supergiant Games also were hitting Game Pass as well. So it seems like these conversations might have started with like, hey, we want to acquire you, and the companies just weren't ready to do it, and they're just like, but we can cut a deal for Game Pass. And it looks like Microsoft was like, okay, yeah, that works out, and it's cheaper.
Yeah, and it sounds like we heard 26 million Game Pass subscribers.
Yes, I believe that is the current number for that, and basically them just being like, hey, we kind of saturated the console market of where it is right now for Xbox, so we're just diving in and hoping to turn the PC and cloud market into the future of Xbox.
Yeah, I mean, and just I understand there's cost and there's profit margins and there's lines, but it just means that even at $10 a month at the low tier, which the prices just went up, like,
Except
you're
on
still
PC.
talking about. Yeah, you're still talking about $3 billion a year from Game Pass.
Yeah, which is why Microsoft is so interested in pursuing this, because they're like, there's so many more people that can subscribe, and that's money on the table.
The amount of money that Microsoft is generating from Game Pass in a 12-month, let's just go to a 15-month calendar. They could have purchased Bungie for what Sony paid for them just from their Game Pass revenue. Now, yes, again, please don't come at me. I understand
It's
that,
not
like that money,
$1
right? That money's
profit.
going into 343, and that money's going into Obsidian, and that money's going into
Deals
ZeniMax.
with
I
Atlas.
get all that. Yeah, like I understand all that in cost, but you cannot tell me that you would have to really dig into their books to show me something that they're spending more than $3 billion a year on game production. Spending
in terms of with Game Pass specifically, yeah,
right. Well, just do you really think that they're like
marketing
what is
itself is
Microsoft? Microsoft
surprisingly
owns. I know, but Microsoft owns what, 26 studios? I think we said right now.
something like that. Yeah,
Yeah. So like I don't know, 26 divided by 3 billion. Like on top of the random person that buys Minecraft on Switch, and it all this stuff like that will buy Starfield. They'll pay $70 just for Starfield.
There's a reason why Microsoft's still in the Xbox business, even though they're in third place, and it looks like they will never catch up. Microsoft still sees value in this, and Microsoft's not just doing it for funsies. There's money to be made, so they're gonna do it. And again, we'll talk a little bit about, like how far they're willing to go, or some of the ideas being thrown around.
I mean, circling back to what Jim Ryan said, and to piggyback on your point where Jim Ryan says all the developers are against it, then why did IO sign the deal with them? Why did Sega sign the deal with them? Like, why did Bethesda or why did ZeniMax even say yes in the first place?
No, and that's just how it goes. And the fanboy tribal war stuff is plays a huge part into like the confusion with like, is Game Pass viable? Yes and no. Depends on what you mean. If you're looking for global domination, then it is worth the investment, and that's what Microsoft's trying to do. So it's just a mess. Dave, I'm just going to go through some tidbits that just wouldn't fit in their own category. This was funny to listen to, but the judge lost patience on day 2 of the FTC trial because the reps were kind of grilling the FTC lawyer or representatives were grilling Phil Spencer for about an hour, maybe 45 minutes about will Call of Duty stay on PlayStation? And Phil Spencer, in like a dozen different ways, said, yes, they will stay previous Call of Duty games will stay on PlayStation. Future Call of Duty games, if PlayStation allows it, will be on PlayStation. And they basically made him promise, cross his fingers, no take backsies. They made him do everything and say everything to commit to PlayStation getting Call of Duty, to the point to where the judge just kind of cut the questioning short, and it led to like an audible gasp from the courtroom because they just weren't expecting the judge to be like so blunt.
A human being?
Yeah, basically like hey, stop
going like, how
pestering
many
me.
times does he have to tell you?
Yeah.
Like,
and Phil Spencer kept trying to say like PlayStation has to allow us to publish this game on their platform. Like we can't just make Call of Duty and drop it on the PlayStation Store. We can't press discs without
I think
them.
he even used Valve as an example. Like he's like, I went to Valve to sign a contract with them, and Valve's like, no, we don't need a contract with you. We will prove that you want to put your games on my platform. Yeah. Like we will prove to you that we are a viable option for you. We don't need a contract. We're confident enough in our business practices that you will want your game on our platform.
Us, so we don't need to put pen to paper.
Right.
And the judge basically just was like, I'm just done with this stuff. And this has happened multiple times where the judge just loses patience with the FTC people just because it just seems like they're ill-prepared or a little ill-informed. I mentioned this earlier, but props were brought out to show that the Switch shouldn't be compared to Xbox and Series X. That didn't go over well. It seems like there was like some snickering, some laughing happening from that. This is kind of funny because this is PlayStation kind of shooting themselves in the foot. But Xbox only acquired Bethesda because they heard PlayStation was looking to make Starfield exclusive or timed exclusive like they did with Deathloop and Ghostwire. So basically Phil Spencer went to Microsoft and was just like, we're going to lose 3 Bethesda games in a row if we don't do anything. And apparently the response was just fucking buy Bethesda. Like that is basically what happened.
So let me ask you a question, and my wife's kind of the stance that Angela's been taking is, okay, so if they have the money to buy Bethesda, to buy ZeniMax, why couldn't they just outbid Sony for Starfield? And why couldn't they do the same thing that Sony's been doing with similar to like Final Fantasy 16 and like the Harry Potter content? Like if Microsoft has all this money, why can't they just go, how much to have Starfield on Xbox only?
Because they've done this in the past with Tomb Raider, and it doesn't work when you're the third place console. I think it's just basically like, if we're going to spend money, we're going to spend money. We have bigger wallets to play with. Let's just take care of this. And they also have a different game plan in terms of like, we're trying to spread a service, not sell a console. I think if they were just in the console business, like they were in Xbox One era,
so you're saying it's about the library and the day one games.
Like if we're gonna spend $500 million or how many millions of dollars it's gonna cost to get these exclusives, not saying that they cost that much, but like if we're gonna drop 50 million to 100 million per game on Bethesda, let's just see how much they're worth in total, because we have the financial backing to ask that question and then just pull the trigger. I think that's what it comes down to for that. But what was your stance to Angela about that?
I think it was more similar, like something similar to that. It was just like, if they're going to spend that much money, then they might as well just get the whole thing and then have creative control. Because I think some of it that came out today, or came out on Fridays or Monday or Friday's testimony, is that as much as I don't really know if you've even put it in here, of Pete Hines' confusion.
It's in there.
Okay. It sounds like Pete Hines there's emails that he was confused of like, why is it just a slam dunk that Activision games are going to be multi-platform and our games aren't going to be multi-platform? And I think that, but at the same time, I think maybe it was, I don't know if it was Hines or Todd Howard or whomever was a Bethesda representative, was saying it actually makes it easier for them to only develop on 2
Hines.
platforms instead of 3. Yeah. So he's kind of talking out of both ends of his mouth, and I think maybe it was something that you don't realize until you know that you have to, until you know that, or until you get to do it. When it's like, okay, get it running on PC. Okay, get it running on Xbox. Okay, those architects are very similar. Get it running on PlayStation. Okay, that's a little bit more of a challenge, And it sounds like Hines said that Starfield would not be coming in September if it had to come to PlayStation.
Yeah, it would have spread things out. So the email basically that Dave talked about, it was an email between, I believe, Pete Hines and his team, because his team was just like, hey, what do we do about questions? Like, one journalist, we're going to go to an event. Journalists are going to ask us, like, how come your stuff's exclusive and Call of Duty's not? So he went to Phil Spencer to be like, what do I say? Like, this seems kind of weird that there's two different rule sets. We don't know what the resolution was that Phil Spencer told him, other than maybe what you talked about of just like the development and money saved. Like development time and money saved is what it equated to. But yeah,
there's also not the stress. They're saying, like, they couldn't afford to fail. Like it kind of sounds like they, we would have never seen a hi-fi rush ever, because Bethesda wouldn't have had enough confidence in it,
or they would have had to streamroll it into like a bigger game, and then that would have lost its heart.
Or we would have seen them announce, and it's another bullet point you have on here, we would have seen them announce a game 6 or 7 years before it's going to be done.
Yes.
Yeah, I swear they announced Elder Scrolls 6 or teased Elder Scrolls 6 at a press conference you were at.
It was at one of the E3s we were at. It was at 2018, I think. 2018 or 2019. It was like a Fallout 76 one. Was I at that one? That was the Andrew WK one. I don't think I was there.
Well, we were at an E3 that we attended.
Yeah, we were in the city. But it does sound like Pete Hines was frustrated with the whole thing, because it sounds like there just wasn't communication to his team on how they should handle that, because before Pete Hines would just make up his own rules, but now he has to answer to Phil Spencer. So it sounds like there's this little frustration of lack of communication there, which is something I think we've always been kind of worried about, of just like, Phil Spencer's got to manage like 26 studios now. And shit like this happens. But it sounds like it was more of just like, what do I tell Todd Howard, developer of Starfield, when a journalist asks him about exclusivity? Like, what PR speak does he need to spit
for the
out?
record? So for the record, my wife's in chat and she said, well, then then Microsoft can't complain about Sony purchasing exclusives. They're not. They're really not complaining about Sony purchasing exclusives. They're using it as an example and a reason of why they've made purchases of companies. Yeah.
And right now is one specifically, that came with the Bethesda one Dave mentioned earlier. Indiana Jones was originally supposed to be multi-platform, but the deal was renegotiated by Phil Spencer so that they would have a Disney IP to match Sony's, IP of Spider-Man. So it sounds like that one, and that became kind of a contention with the FTC of like, so you did renegotiate to take something away from PlayStation. And Phil Spencer said like the game wasn't in development. It was just an idea. Platforms were not promised publicly, and Disney agreed to it. Like Disney agreed with Sony on Spider-Man. So that kind of ended that discussion, but it was something the FTC tried to jump on to try and use against Spencer, and he kind of just deflated that of just like, I'm not taking anything away if there's nothing ever really officially promised to them. So yeah, Indiana Jones, I think we talked a little bit about that last week. But yeah, this is going to happen. Phil Spencer is going to renegotiate deals if he can. And I think when we talked about it last week, you said like Disney agreed. Like,
yeah, this is no different than IO Interactive coming out and showing their stuff to, like, whether it's they were trying to get a marketing deal. Like, I that's the part that I really want to understand how it goes from an independent developer or a non-first party developer. Of, let's use IO as an example. Like, I think in a perfect world, like, IO would say, okay, here's our game, and I think that this is just me speculating, but they go to Sony and they go to Nintendo and they go to Xbox and say, this is what we're doing. And they're pitching marketing deals. They're pitching like whether you want to help us publish, do you want to get in on this? Like, we need access to your hardware. Like, this is our plan. Like, if it's going to be on next gen hardware, like, hey, this is what we want to do. Is this enough for us to get a dev kit from you or something like to that example? Because I don't really feel like IO can just make a game and say, all right, here it is, and like, we're releasing in 6 months. Okay, Microsoft, like, of course it's going to be on your platform. I think Microsoft knows about it years in advance. And and so does Sony, and so does Nintendo, and so then it becomes into one of those things where they go and they travel around or whatever, or they do their Zoom meetings, and this is what we're doing, this is what it looks like, and Microsoft going, hey, we want it, like, we want it on, like, what, like, are you open to exclusivity? Like, sure, we're open to offers, like, write it on a napkin, let's talk about it. And when those are happening, like, that's where like some of the competition comes from, and sometimes it could just be you, like somebody on the focus group saw a glimpse of something that says, hey, like that's going to be something cool and interesting, and like what are these companies supposed to do, like not take the money?
Yeah,
like,
it can come down to just the companies making the offer, like actually asking, like Sony could have had a meeting with IO and like, hey, let's do a marketing deal, and PlayStation's like, maybe we can do this, and they go to Xbox, and Xbox is like, we could do that, or we could just buy you. And then the deal gets made out of there because they asked. Like
what did like we've been talking about for months, like with Bungie, like what is this third IP that obviously made them purchasable, to make them wantable? What is Supergiant Games making that made Sony want them? What is Haven doing that made them want it? We see what Haven's doing, but like these are things that were very early on in development that not only convinced them to want it on their platform exclusively, but also convinced them enough to be like, here, like let's talk a bigger check. Yeah. Like let's talk 20 years. Let's talk the next 10, 15 years, not just the next 3 to 5 years.
And a lot of these deals and negotiations end up getting NDA'd to hell, to where they can't just take that offer they got from Sony and then go to Microsoft and be like, Sony's offering us this much, because that could be under NDA. So they have to go into these meetings kind of blind just to see what's going to be offered and then make a decision based off that.
But I promise you that Phil Spencer and Pete Hines had some beers and talk some big fucking numbers.
Oh yeah, and I think they had more than beers. I've met both of them.
But I'm just saying, like there was definitely some cordial conversations that were happening with these owners of companies and like high end CEOs of companies and stuff that that made these things possible. And there's probably a ton of like handshake things that are happening of like, well, you're still gonna Pete, you're still gonna get to do what you do. You just get to do it with a bigger backpack.
Yeah, and a lot of times it just takes like stress off these companies, especially if you're talking about like an independent studio. Of you won't believe how much stress is relieved from like an indie studio that signs with Microsoft, because now they don't have to handle 401ks and HR shit.
That just gets a flat ass check for $20 million.
Yeah, and then just to get to develop their
6
game.
months before the game comes out.
Yeah, like, oh, we don't have to worry about like hiring HR people because we'll just have your people, or oh, we don't have to. You know how many game developers have probably like sweated bullets because they're like, how do I pay people every 2 weeks or every month?
Yeah. Or how do I get my game on the front page of Xbox's store? Oh, you just signed our Game Pass deal, and we'll take care of all of it. Yeah. We'll announce it for you. We'll put it on our stage for you. We'll put it on our Twitter feeds for you. Like, we'll do all of it. And we'll retweet anything you tweet. Our reach is 10 times what your reach is. You know, Sony can say the same thing, because if you look at the data on Twitter of whenever Sony tweets once a month and Microsoft tweets 3 times a week, like the amount of interaction that Sony gets on that one tweet versus the amount of interaction that Xbox gets on their 3 tweets is not even close.
There's a reason why, like, if you just look at the PlayStation Store, if you remember the PlayStation Store back in the day, there was like a dozen things on the screen. And now on the PlayStation Store, it's like a handful of things, because that space is so valuable that it generates so much money, just like a little square on that PlayStation Store that can make or break your game. As opposed to back then when they would just like throw up like 30 things on a PlayStation Store. Now it's just like, no, these companies have all paid this shit ton of money for this little square. Coming from this, Elder Scrolls 6 is 5+ years away. Spencer wouldn't commit the platforms. FTC was kind of questioning him on, will this come to PlayStation? And he basically said, which is like a shitty response, but also hilarious, of just like, it's so far along, I don't even know what Xbox platform this game's going to come out on. Which is a good workaround, like answering like, no, this shit's going to be exclusive. It's a funny way of just being like, hey, this is just a figment of an idea. Development has not started on it, so I can't commit to if it comes to PlayStation, because I don't even know what Xbox it's going to come out on, or if it's coming to Xbox. We could just be in cloud space by then.
Therefore, he said I can't commit to like if because I don't know what PlayStation is going to be, what's it going to look like, you know?
That's another thing that Jim Ryan basically said, that they will not be supplying Activision with dev kits if the deal goes through, which totally makes sense. This also led to the FTC being kind of upset that Minecraft doesn't have a native PS5 version, because they also weren't provided dev kits at that time. Or Phil Spencer was like, hey, we weren't given dev kits before launch, so we couldn't do a native Minecraft report, which the FTC people were like, well, it's been 3 years, where is it? But
my data shows that I don't need to do it. It's not, my player base hasn't declined.
And that's what it came down to, is Phil Spencer was just like, it's backwards compatible with PS4 on the PS5, and financially it just doesn't make sense because that's where the player base is. And then someone actually responded in like Twitter being like, actually, there's no Series X Minecraft either. It is also just being used with backwards compatibility. So it was
what they do, like a 4K package, but I think you could buy that on Sony as well.
Yeah,
I think they did like a 4K texture upgrade pack.
It's just not
like
as up to date
$15 or whatever
as the PC one. So that happened. Then probably the most embarrassing thing is the FTC people didn't understand how an acquisition works. So Phil Spencer had to explain how an acquisition works at least twice, I heard. It could have been more times. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but apparently the FTC people that were talking, which made it seem like the FTC sent their B team to this hearing, they did not know what an acquisition or how an acquisition worked, and Phil Spencer had to explain it, and it was kind of a embarrassing moment for the FTC.
Talk to me like I'm 5 moment. So which was just kind of, I was listening to that, and it was kind of baffling, of just like, okay, they did not know how an acquisition worked. And I think that's kind of when the same day the judge was kind of getting fed up with the FTC, like felt like time was being wasted. Last thing we'll pick up from this, if anyone's still on listening with us going deep on this, an email from Booty, I think it's Matthew Booty, basically asked Phil Spencer if they should just outspend PlayStation to the point where they get them out of the gaming business. This was in 2019. The FTC brought this up of like, oh, so you are trying to kill the competition. Phil Spencer weakly said, like in a very weak way, was just like, that was an option and we did not continue down that path. But a year later they did acquire Bethesda, and 2 years later they did try and buy Activision Blizzard. That's the goal of every competitor, though. Amazon's trying to put other companies out of business. Meijer tries to put Kroger out of business. Like these companies would benefit tremendously. I just left a company that got put out of business essentially by Amazon. Yeah. Because they just did a better job than they were doing. And whether you like it or don't like it, like Netflix put Blockbuster out. You can say that Netflix was one of the main causes for putting Blockbuster out, on top of poor business practices. Now, the difference is Sony doesn't have poor business practices right now. And that's why
Microsoft, it's controversial for them to flaunt their wallet of like, let's just buy everything and basically like choke PlayStation out. But it's just funny because you're right, like that's best business. But just the idea that Phil Spencer tried to say like, we chose not to go down that path, and then they acquire Bethesda, and then they're trying to acquire Activision.
Yeah, but them acquiring Bethesda, it wasn't going to put Sony out of business. Them acquiring Activision Blizzard's not going to put Sony out of business. No, but
it's just funny because they're like, we weren't going to go down the path where we're going to outspend PlayStation to like hurt them, and it's like you spent $70 million.
I guess at the root cause of it for me, what I've been struggling with is like, what's the alternative? So Microsoft opens a new studio, let's just say, and then they just go to they walk into, which I think they would be, they take their headhunting recruiters, and they just target ZeniMax. They say, if Spencer says, I want 40% of current ZeniMax employees, and he pays his recruiters to do it, whatever it takes to get you to come work for Microsoft.
It's basically what he did for Square Enix in terms of like, hey, we want Crystal Dynamics to work exclusively for us.
So would everybody be okay with that? Like if Spencer's like, okay, we're gonna open up Zenisoft, and it's gonna be right next to my office, and I hired a recruiting team and I want every single person you can get from ZeniMax. If they, and I don't care if you have to go 30% over their current salary. I want every single person, and let's just say they get 55% of the task force. Like, what's the difference?
Well, it's funny because it's basically like what Xbox, why they took Obsidian, of just like, we need like a Bethesda like thing. Oh, let's get Obsidian because those are former
Mhm.
Bethesda people.
Yep.
Or I just had it in my head. EA basically
Mhm.
taking Infinity War with Respawn.
Yeah.
So like it happens, but yeah, people would have thrown a fit if Microsoft went on an even crazier spending spree of like just buying smaller studios and just headhunting other studios.
Yeah. Or I don't know if Spencer takes Neil Druckmann out to lunch and says, "Hey, what would it take? Yeah, like just like hypothetically, like what would it take for me to give you a studio in under my umbrella?" Druckmann might be like, "I'm never going to do it." He could say it, or you got to pay me $600 million a year, and then what do you do when Spencer says, "Okay"?
And that's
what do you do?
And I think that's a fear with PlayStation is because Microsoft does have the fuck around money.
Yeah.
That they could just do that. They wouldn't do that because it's like like questionable business practices or.
But like, would we hear about that?
No, you would just get the announcement.
But you would just get the Neil Druckmann saying, "I've left Naughty Dog. Thank you so much for all this." And then 6 months later, when his non-compete expired, or hey, I'm happy to say that I'm like it's like Sony essentially did it with Kojima and Death Stranding.
Yeah, because they signed that deal like immediately after. Like
it wasn't even done. Like he wasn't done with his compete clause.
Yeah.
Like he was supposed to be a PlayStation Experience, and Konami's like,
Yeah. Yeah, so
like,
that does happen.
We got 48 hours still. You better not put them on your stage.
I would imagine that there's like tampering agreements now with like the big names because of the Kojima thing at this point. But like, I'm sure not all the talent is under anti-tampering clause, especially how they treat game developers.
Like, it's gonna happen. Remove Spencer. Jeff Bezos goes and takes Neil Druckmann out to lunch. Hey, I want to do this. I want you to run my entire video game division. How much?
Oh, you telling me like the Warner Brother Discovery guy hasn't taken Druckmann out and been like, we have studios that we don't.
But then Druckmann probably says this much, and the guy's like, shit, never mind.
Yeah.
But then what happens if Bezos says, okay?
Yeah, and that's a thing that like PlayStation would have to worry about, which is what other companies are worried about, which is why you just got to take care of your employees so they don't have to question that stuff. But yeah, no, it's man, we're not even done with this FTC stuff. We're done right now for this episode, but there's 2 more days of FTC stuff going down, and we're gonna find out more. There's stuff I didn't include in here because it'd just be too much. But yeah, no, I think we're gonna start getting more information on some of that stuff, in terms of like offers that are being made, and some of the more business dealings with stuff. Not anyone being taken out for dinner, but. It's going to get better.
I hope that we see like Final Fantasy 16 numbers. Like I hope something comes out because that's a big thing. Like I really hope we see Final Fantasy 16 numbers,
or at least the Bethesda numbers for Ghostwire and like and Deathloop.
Yeah.
And like, what was the theoretical offer for Starfield? Because you'd think Starfield would have been a big thing for Bethesda that they would want on every platform, but it wasn't. There's also stuff where Bobby Kotick basically like bullied Xbox into keeping Call of Duty on the platform, because that almost went PlayStation exclusive a couple years ago, but it was more Activision trying to bully a better deal out of Xbox. So a lot of stuff has come out in the last couple of days, and surprisingly, I don't think we've heard anyone from Activision yet, which I'm wondering if that's going to be day 4 and 5, just to see what's going on there. But that's it, Dave, for the news. We've gotten out of this, and you're going to be gone in the next 2 weeks, so Chris will have to deal with this talk.
Might have to record a little mini rant and send it.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
All right, so as of now, like Michael mentioned, there really hasn't been much news. Therefore, there hasn't really been anything that's been delayed. What we're playing and watching, for me, I'm starting to ramp up into some craziness at work. So I was able to, thanks to Riot Games directly, I was able to get a code for Convergence. It actually, the Convergence, a League of Legends story, I played about, I think, a half an hour when I got a chance. I got through like the first level. I did download it and play it on my ROG Ally. It does run well on the Ally, which is not surprising. It doesn't look like it's a super taxing game.
It's a gorgeous game too.
Yes, it's very, very nice, very so far very fun. Very early on, the rewind feature is interesting.
There's a lot of button presses in that game as well. But you're only half hour in, so you'll see.
Yeah, so I am enjoying that. I'm kind of just trying to be in a little bit of like a kind of like a chill mode. I'm trying to, because I mean, full disclosure, my anxiety is a little ramped up at the moment as I'm getting ready to do something that I haven't done before. So, and you guys, anybody that's been listening to me for a while knows I tend to be my own worst enemy about a lot of things. So I'm trying to acknowledge and control that. So therefore I tend to just kind of like space out and watch reality TV. Like I've tripped into like randomness of like Bar Rescue, of just like turning it on and laying on the couch to turn my mind off. Makes me feel better as a direct leader watching that show. So and dabbling very, very minimally in Destiny. And so I haven't really been, playing much of that. I knew that I do really like the ROG Ally as a device. I think it's really good as a device. It just kind of came into my hands at an inopportune time right now. So it'll probably be definitely more. I'll be able to speak more in depth into it until in July and August. Once I get out of this opening procedures and get into my own comfort and my own routine. I've been in this position for like 6 months now, and I don't have a home. So as we open, I will have a home. So that'll definitely help me feel a little bit better and feel a little bit more routinistic. So that's where I'm at with kind of playing and watching right now.
Yeah, so for me right now, still playing Diablo 4. Kind of started to fall out of it a little bit, but still chugging through. Definitely haven't been played as much as I played that first weekend, where that's all we did that for like over that holiday weekend, like 3-4 days.
Real quick before you go on, is the seasonal content, the way that they're discussing seasons, is that bothering you? Is that what you already expected?
I didn't know about that going in terms of like people talking about it, basically not a full reset, but like you'd want to roll a different character for each season. I'm okay with that because I'm not that committed to this game to where like I'm just kind of just beating up random demons and leveling up, grabbing loot, not caring what the loot looks like, just throwing on good shit. So I don't really care about my character as long as the gameplay is still fun, though I think last time I checked my play clock, it was like 25 hours. I'm kind of hitting a point where all the dungeons are feeling a little bit samey.
Well, they just released a huge patch today,
which I haven't had time to download.
Yeah, so. With a lot of it sounds like it was a lot of ability tuning and a lot of, I guess I could be wrong on this, but a lot of the ability to teleport to a dungeon.
Oh, which would be nice, using those as waypoints.
I could be wrong. Because I'm not playing the game.
Got my expectations up now, Dave, because it sucks.
There was a lot of dungeon fixing that people were like, okay, wow, and a lot of
just ask Ben in our Discord. He seems
and a lot of ability buffing, like most games. Most games tone down stuff, and they think that you're too powerful, and it looks like they've amped this up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing playing it. It's just. I'm looking at other games right now, so I'll review it next week. Can't really talk about it, but AEW Fight Forever, was able to get that for review, so I've been diving into that. Can't talk about it. Was able to get access to Crash Team Rumble through a friend, and been playing that. Probably give that a review next week. Crash Bandicoot multiplayer game. Probably talk about that a little more in depth with our guest next week. As they're playing it as well. So I've been playing primarily those 3 games, and I'm looking at other games that I kind of want to play but don't have time or want to spend the money on. So that is kind of everything I'm playing. Next week definitely will probably be a heavier review week because potentially we'll have 2 games to review and discuss. But as of right now, that's kind of all I'm doing. Not really watching anything. There was AEW pay-per-view, so last week, a lot of wrestling in terms of went to a show on Wednesday, saw a pay-per-view on Sunday, and now I'm playing a video game. But AEW Forbidden Door, really good show. Should not be 4.5 hours long, which I think I talk to Dave every time there's a pay-per-view of like, pay-per-view should not be as long as they are. I should not be watching from 6 o'clock to 11 something to watch wrestling.
Baseball games used to be longer than that. Now they're not.
Now they're not, yeah. But yeah, wrestling definitely can take a bit of time, but it was a really good show overall. But wrestling shows have gotten so long where I hate at the end of the night being like, they could have skipped this match, they could have skipped this match, they could have skipped this match, even if the matches were good. I'm not in the mindset that everyone needs to be on the show every pay-per-view or every week.
Right.
But that is kind of it for playing and watching.
Okay.
Dave?
All right, we did get a couple questions this week, so thank you to those who sent the questions. We're gonna go. You can send us those questions using hashtag AskDigitalDays on Twitter. You can post them in Discord in the Ask Digital Days channel that we have within our Discord server, or you could just post them directly in the Facebook group, which I think was where the majority of these questions came from. So, and it's actually funny, the Europeans ask more questions than the Americans.
They're just more curious.
So Ali writes, if you were limited to play games from a single studio, which studio would it be? You go first.
Okay, so if I only could play one studio's games past, present, and future, I would pick Insomniac, which shouldn't be too surprising. They make some of my favorite games in terms of they were the original creators of the Spyro games. I love the Resistance games. I became a Ratchet and Clank fan later, so there's a lot of Ratchet and Clank games I would need to play. And of course, they make Spider-Man. And Spider-Man was one of my favorite games of all times. And there's more Spider-Man to come, and they're making Wolverine. And I think there's a good variety in terms of, like, yeah, they're mostly third-person games, but they're different enough that I don't think I would get too exhausted from it, as opposed to where I could get exhausted from Naughty Dog in terms of the
this is gonna sound like a terrible cop out for me, but like
you're gonna say Bungie.
No, Nintendo.
Okay.
We don't have different Nintendo studios. The same studio makes Zelda that makes Mario, right?
Questionable, Dave.
What studio makes Zelda, Michael?
I would have to look it up, but the problem is there's like main Nintendo and auxiliary Nintendo, so you
Correct.
are right in saying Nintendo, because Miyamoto and like the main other producer, which I feel bad I don't know his name, you would be locked into their stuff. But Nintendo's a good answer. A lot of Marios.
All right, so Stefan writes, what is your favorite food to eat at the ballpark? So you want to go?
Yeah, so it's going to sound weird because I'm from Chicago, but it's going to be nachos. A Chicago dog, you want someone that's going to take time and care and love building that perfect hot dog.
That doesn't happen at a concession stand at a ballpark.
No, that does not happen. They smush the hot dog in aluminum foil, hand it to you, and say the ketchup's over there, and you're like, why the fuck is there ketchup over there for my hot dog?
Yeah.
It's mustard only, and where's the rest of it? But yeah, nachos, it's the simplest thing, just cheese chips, and it's less depressing looking than a smashed hot dog.
Mine is similar. If I had to like literally choose one thing to eat there, or a favorite thing to eat there, just the big ass like soft pretzels. Like I know you don't like pretzels, but
are disgusting, man. Dry.
Yeah, you haven't. Yeah,
it's weird. Like I don't know, man. I like pretzel bread like for like a burger, but an actual whole pretzel, just no. That just don't know.
All right. So and then Matt writes, what is your most anticipated game within the next 12 months?
Oh, it's going to be Spider-Man 2, even though I wasn't super thrilled coming out of the PlayStation Showcase and Summer Game Fest. I'm a sucker for those Spider-Man games. So that's probably my most anticipated game. Surprisingly, Starfield is like climbing up my list.
Yeah.
You know, I was like a complete pass on Starfield. Now I'm kind of like, I'm on the fence. I got Game Pass. I'll download it.
I feel like that we know what Spider-Man's going to be, and that's totally fine. Like, we know what Spider-Man 2 is going to be, and that's totally fine.
And that's all.
So, and I agreed. I'm good with it, but it doesn't. It's a purchase. It's an automatic purchase for me. Like, it'll be a day one playing for me. All that stuff. But in terms of what would be the next anticipated thing, the problem is if you're talking about what's going to come from essentially July 1st of 2023 to the July 1st of 2024. I don't think we know much past like February 1st. So
I can pull out that handy dandy Game Informer game release list.
But I would have to go with Immortal, the EA Magic shooter game, Immortal Avium.
Man, Dave, for your sake, I hope that game pulls through for you.
I know.
Like,
Like Starfield, I'm kind of on the other stuff that's coming out. There's nothing I'm super anticipated about, but for some reason, I just really like what I'm seeing from Immortal. I just really hope it's, to your point, like you've said, I hope it's like a 10 to 12 hour just solid single player campaign. They don't really try to do anything crazy to it.
Hoping for a solid 7 from that game, and anything above that is going to be beautiful.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of what has been presented to me with release dates between now and then, like, without digging into like a document like that, it would have to be that.
I can see that. And I'm looking at 2024 stuff. Like, there's plenty of stuff that's like announced, but nothing grabbing at me. Like, I don't care about Suicide Squad. Prince of Persia: Lost Crown is a game that I'm definitely super interested in, but I wouldn't say it's like my most anticipated.
Yeah,
game.
It's cool looking, but it doesn't get me like super excited. I might be like, oh, that comes out next week, cool.
Yeah.
But versus like when I saw the Immortals delay, I was like, damn it.
Well, that was a game you've been talking about for months, which is why I'm very hopeful that it works out for you, because it's been one of those games that I wasn't expecting you to be the one that brings that up as often as you've brought it up. But like when it got delayed, I knew that was gonna, like, you were just like, damn it. Like, that was my summer
it might
game.
it might be terrible, but it's different. I like first person games. I truly enjoy first person games. It's a shooter, but it's not a shooter.
This could be the thing that opens you up to like, hey, how similar is this to Elder Scrolls? And I'll be like,
correct.
Pretty similar, and you'll pick that up.
Yep. I mean, I'm all for gateway drugs.
Yeah. You heard it here first.
All right, so those are our questions. You can send us more questions using hashtag AskDigitalDays. Again, posting them on our Discord, posting them just directly on Facebook. Hey, question for the podcast, hashtag AskDigitalDays or whatever. Right in the Facebook group, right in there's a specific Ask Digital Days channel in our Discord server that's linked in the show notes as well. And you can also just put them on Twitter using that hashtag. Although you probably should just tag us at Digital Days Pod too when you do that, because we haven't really searched that hashtag in a while. At least I haven't.
I search it from time to time.
Okay. So yeah, that's our show for this week. Like I said at the beginning, more than likely I will not be here next week, but I'm sure Michael will keep you guys abreast to what is going on, when they're recording, who he's recording with.
Yeah, don't know if they will be live on Twitch during those weeks, because that causes some extra work on me.
Slacker.
Also, I don't know if the people that I'm recording with are going to be on camera.
Yeah, that's true.
So we'll see.
Maybe I'll try to. You know what? I'm not even going to say it. I was like,
yeah,
maybe
Dave,
I'll try to do some random streaming there, and I can't even say that.
Maybe some July 4th streaming.
I think I have I'm still working that day. I think I have 75 hours scheduled next week at work.
Yeah.
So all right. You can follow us on Twitter at Digital Days Pod. You can follow Michael at the First MJC. You can follow myself at Good Dave Hunt. Facebook group, Discord server are linked in the show notes. Patreon is linked in the show notes. Please check those out. Remember to review, subscribe on Twitch if you haven't. Just go to Twitch on your mobile phone, click subscribe, link it up with your Amazon account, all that fun stuff. And that's free. That's a great way to support. Share the show. Retweet, share on Facebook, all that stuff, so more people check it out. And I hope everyone has a great week or a great couple of weeks, and keep moving forward.
Don't be a dick. See ya.